California's housing dream is starting to crack. For years, people were told the same thing. California was expensive, but always worth it. The coastline, the job market, the weather, even if the payment hurt, the long-term upside would make the sacrifice look smart later. That belief carried buyers through bidding wars, carried sellers through years of easy appreciation, and carried entire cities through an era when almost any listing could find someone willing to stretch. But in 2026, that belief is fading fast. Statewide, California home prices were down 1.3% year-over-year. In February 2026, sales were down 1.5%, and median days on market climbed to 60 from 43 a year earlier. Redfin has described the 2026 market as sluggish, with buyers more cautious, more negotiation, and higher carrying costs still shaping what people can afford. That is how housing corrections usually begin, not always with panic, not always with one giant collapse, but often with hesitation. A home sits longer. A buyer asks for a bigger discount. A seller cuts price. Then another seller on the same street cuts too. From the outside, the market still looks functional, but inside the mood has changed. It starts feeling heavy. Today we are looking at 10 California cities where falling prices, slower sales, fading urgency, and weaker confidence are hitting hardest. Some are glamorous, some are practical, some are supposed to be protected. In 2026, none of that feels as certain anymore. We'll move through them in order, and stay with me all the way to the final city, because what's happening at the top of this list shows what can happen when image, money, and prestige stop being enough to hold a market together. Number 10, Riverside. For years, Riverside benefited from one powerful idea. If Los Angeles was too expensive, too crowded, and too difficult, Riverside still offered a path in. Buyers could still get more house, more yard, and more breathing room while staying connected to the wider Southern California economy. It was never sold as glamorous. It was sold as workable. And that is exactly why the weakness matters. In February 2026, Riverside home prices were down 1.6% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $639,500. Homes were taking 63 days to sell instead of 48. A major slowdown for a city whose value proposition depends heavily on practicality and affordability relative to coast. Riverside is not a market that runs on prestige. It runs on math. Buyers come here because they need the numbers to work better than they do closer to Los Angeles. But once rates stay high, insurance pressure lingers, and homes stop moving quickly, that value story weakens. The commute feels longer. The payment feels heavier. The future appreciation story feels less convincing. And once a city like Riverside loses its sense of financial usefulness, the correction becomes much easier to feel. The city still has homes moving and demand still exists, but in 2026 it no longer feels like the simple solution it once was. It feels like a market where buyers have stopped rushing and sellers are beginning to realize the old escape hatch is not as easy as... Number 9, Stockton. Stockton shows how California's more attainable cities are no longer automatically safe just because they are cheaper than the coast. Stockton has long attracted buyers who wanted a realistic path into ownership. Compared with the Bay Area, it felt reachable. Compared with many parts of Southern California, it felt manageable. 4 years, that was enough to support momentum. But 2026 is putting pressure on that affordability story. In February 2026, Stockton home prices were down 4.6% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $415,000. Homes sold after 44 days on average, and total sales dropped from 152 to 125. In some Stockton submarkets, the weakness looked sharper, with notable year-over-year declines and slower movement. That matters because Stockton depends on buyers who still need the payment to feel rational. This is not a city where everyone can casually absorb rising costs or sit through a soft market without concern. Buyers here are more payment sensitive, more value conscious, and more likely to pause if the numbers no longer feel compelling. Once that pause spreads, the market starts losing one of its biggest strengths: liquidity. A city like this does not need a dramatic luxury crash to feel pain. It only needs enough softness to make affordability look less reliable and resale feel less certain. In 2026, that softness is already showing up. The houses still exist. The demand still exists. But the confidence underneath the deal is not what it was. And in a value-driven city, that can be enough. Number 8, Pasadena. Pasadena ranks here because it captures a quieter, more polished version of the same pressure. This is not a city that usually looks fragile. Pasadena has beauty, reputation, old money credibility, and neighborhoods that make buyers feel like they are purchasing something permanent. For years, that image helped protect values. People believed Pasadena would hold because it always felt like one of the safer choices inside Los Angeles County. But 2026 is testing that belief. In February 2026, Pasadena home prices were down 3.7% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $1.3 million. Homes were taking 37 days to sell instead of 33, and the number of homes sold slipped from 67 to 63. Those are not catastrophic numbers, but for a city this polished, they matter. The danger in Pasadena is not panic. It is disappointment. Buyers still like the streets, the architecture, and the prestige, but they are no longer moving with the same confidence. They are thinking harder about value, harder about long-term carrying costs, and harder about whether paying up for reputation still makes sense in a market where momentum has weakened. That is how a housing correction starts to feel in a place like Pasadena, not with chaos, but with friction. Sellers still expect premium treatment. Buyers start acting more cautious. Negotiations stretch. Homes that once would have moved smoothly now need more patience and more realism. And once a city built on trust and quality starts losing speed, it sends a warning well beyond its own borders. Number 7, Los Angeles. Los Angeles is one of the biggest examples of how sheer size can hide serious weakness. At a glance, Los Angeles still looks like Los Angeles. Listings everywhere, luxury homes grabbing headlines, new construction, old prestige neighborhoods, celebrity zip codes, and endless demand stories. But underneath that scale, the market is clearly moving with less force than before. In February 2026, Los Angeles home prices were down 4.7% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $1.01 million. Homes were taking 80 days to sell instead of 69, and sales dropped from 1,346 to 1,227. That is not a trivial slowdown for a city this large. What makes Los Angeles especially challenging in this environment is competition. Buyers are not judging one home in isolation. They are comparing neighborhoods, school districts, insurance burdens, renovation needs, commute pain, and increasingly whether the whole city's cost structure still feels defensible. That turns every listing into a harder sale. Los Angeles also suffers from expectation fatigue. Buyers are used to hearing that the city always holds up, always finds demand, always rewards patience. But once homes sit longer and prices start drifting lower, that narrative gets tested hard. And when buyers stop believing the city automatically justifies a premium, every weakness becomes more visible. Number 6, San Diego. San Diego proves that even a premium coastal city can still face real housing pressure. This is one of the most desirable markets in the country. Beaches, weather, military presence, biotech growth, and wealth all help support the city. But premium cities become vulnerable once buyers stop believing the future upside will compensate for present pain. In February 2026, San Diego home prices were down 5.5% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $931,500. Homes were taking 33 days to sell instead of 27. At the same time, rising HOA burdens continue to make the area's cost structure even harder for buyers to justify. Buyers here already start from an extremely high price point. Once you add mortgage rates, taxes, insurance uncertainty, HOA dues, and maintenance, the total monthly burden that means even a modest market slowdown can erase serious wealth and shift sentiment faster than people expect. San Diego still sells a dream beautifully. The listing photos still work. The neighborhoods still attract attention. But the math underneath the dream is getting weaker. Buyers are more careful. They are less emotional. They are more willing to wait for concessions, better terms, or a softer market. And when a premium city starts losing emotional urgency, that is when the correction becomes more dangerous. Number 5, Palm Springs. Palm Springs comes in here because this is what happens when a lifestyle market starts losing the easy confidence that carried it through the boom. Palm Springs thrived during the years when buyers wanted escape, space, design, and the fantasy of desert living. Remote workers, retirees, second home buyers, and investors all bought into the same idea. Palm Springs was not just a housing market. It was a mood that worked when demand felt emotional and effortless. But in 2026, that mood is weakening. In February 2026, Palm Springs home prices were down 4.4% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $650,000. Homes were taking 94 days to sell instead of 83. In parts of the Palm Springs area, the weakness was more intense, with some submarkets showing much steeper year-over-year price declines. That matters because Palm Springs depends heavily on discretionary demand. Buyers do not have to be here for work in the same way they do in San Jose or parts of Los Angeles. They choose Palm Springs because they want the lifestyle. And once a market depends on want rather than need, hesitation becomes much more dangerous. A buyer who starts thinking prices may soften more can simply wait. An investor who doubts a return story can walk away. A second home shopper can rent instead. The homes still look beautiful. The pool still sparkles. The architecture still sells a fantasy. But the buyer is no longer rushing toward the fantasy. They are underwriting the risk. Once that happens, the emotional premium attached to the city starts shrinking. And that is when Palm Springs stops feeling like a dream market and starts feeling like a market in retreat. Number 4, Newport Beach. Newport Beach ranks this high because housing corrections do not always look dramatic in percentage terms. Sometimes they show up through declining sales, fading urgency, and a luxury market that no longer feels effortless. This is one of California's most polished housing stories. Wealth, coastline, exclusivity, boating culture, and elite neighborhoods have long given Newport Beach an aura of protection. Buyers were supposed to keep showing up because scarcity and prestige would always keep the market tight. But 2026 is telling a more fragile story. In February 2026, Newport Beach home prices were down 1.4% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $3.55 million. More importantly, total sales dropped sharply from 94 to 73. In luxury housing, that kind of drop in activity matters because it signals that buyers are stepping back even if the price decline itself looks modest. Luxury markets do not need huge percentage drops to become dangerous. At these prices, even small declines represent serious money. And when sales fall this sharply, it means buyers are taking longer, getting choosier, and pushing harder before they commit. Newport Beach still has the yachts, the coastline, the prestige, and the image. But in 2026, buyers are no longer acting like the city alone justifies any price. They are negotiating like analysts, not chasing like dreamers. Number 3, San Jose. San Jose is one of the clearest examples of a major California market losing altitude fast. For years, San Jose sold one of the strongest economic narratives in America: Silicon Valley money, tech demand, high incomes, career gravity. Buyers stretched because they believed the market would keep rewarding them. That belief held up values even when logic said prices were already too high. But 2026 is testing that belief hard. In February 2026, San Jose home prices were down 7.5% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $1.33 million. In East San Jose, prices were down 7.6%, reinforcing that the weakness is not isolated to one tiny corner of the market. This is not a fringe market. This is one of the economic engines of California. If a place like San Jose starts repricing this sharply, it means buyers are no longer willing to pay almost anything for the future. They are starting to ask harder questions now, and that changes everything. The old logic was simple. Yes, the homes were expensive, but San Jose was San Jose. Jobs, money, prestige, and long-term demand would protect you. In 2026, that assumption looks weaker. Buyers are seeing high prices and slow appreciation in a market that no longer feels immune. That is a dangerous combination because San Jose values were built on extreme confidence. Once that confidence softens, the correction can feel very fast. Number 2, Santa Monica. Santa Monica takes a high spot because the weakness here is too large to ignore, especially for a city that has spent years selling one of the most desirable lifestyles in America. This was supposed to be one of the protected places: ocean proximity, walkability, prestige, restaurants, wealth. The address itself was expected to do much of the work. But that protection is clearly weakening now. In February 2026, Santa Monica home prices were down 12.1% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $1.824 million. Homes were taking 58 days to sell instead of 43, and sales dropped from 72 to 46. In mid-city Santa Monica, prices were down an even steeper 20.7%, with homes taking 112 days to sell. That is an enormous shift for a city like this. Santa Monica was never sold as cheap. It was sold as worth it. And that is a very different kind of promise. Once buyers start doubting whether the price is worth the full burden, the whole premium narrative starts weakening. They still love the ocean. They still love the walkability. They still love the prestige. But they are no longer willing to pay any number just to participate in it. Sellers wait longer. Discounts grow. Buyers act with patience instead of urgency. When a city this desirable starts losing confidence, that is not just softness, that is a warning. And what makes the warning even louder is that Santa Monica's appeal is so obvious. This is exactly the type of market people assume will always find a buyer. So when homes start sitting, sales drop that sharply, and buyers begin demanding more value, it tells you the correction has reached one of the places that once looked safest of all. Number 1. West Hollywood. At the top of the list is West Hollywood. This is where the housing correction story becomes impossible to ignore. West Hollywood is one of the sharpest examples in California of a city where the repricing is already visible in plain numbers. In February 2026, home prices were down a staggering 29.1% year-over-year, with a median sale price around $987,750. Even though homes sold faster than the year before, that kind of price decline is too large to dismiss as noise. This is not a fringe market. This is a culturally powerful, image-driven, emotionally charged city. It is dense, stylish, walkable, and built on the assumption that buyers would always want a lifestyle enough to keep values resilient. But a nearly 30% yearly drop tells you something much more serious is happening. The old willingness to pay almost anything for the location is breaking down. Housing value here was never just about square footage. It was about energy, prestige, access, and identity. Buyers were paying for what the city meant as much as what the property was. Once a market like that starts repricing this aggressively, it means image is no longer doing enough to protect price. And that is the biggest warning of all. The glamour is still there. The restaurants are still there. The walkability is still there. But in 2026, the market is telling you that image alone is no longer enough. When a city like West Hollywood starts losing altitude this fast, the housing conversation stops being theoretical. It becomes real. Housing markets are complex, and 2026 is still unfolding. What we are seeing in these 10 cities reflects real shift